it in terms of figuring out what to measure, how to measure it. I would imagine that is a collaborative decision with lots of different stakeholders. I think it would be very helpful for the audience to hear how you think about it and how you integrate with your colleagues in your organization to really come up with a very holistic approach.
Thanks. I think you do need a framework, right? There's just so many things that you can do. I think all of us have said, including what you just said, which is with so much you can do, the real enemy is doing nothing. And so, I mean, I'm a big believer of just launching, right? And then adjusting on the fly. So we have really galvanized around two things. And again, interesting to hear the panel. One's kind of in Reagan's world, one's kind of in Tom's world. And I've mentioned both briefly, but I'll just highlight them. We measure against the DOJ effective compliance system criteria in all of our compliance areas. So all of this leads on my team are responsible for an annual report where we use an excellent third party to help us look at external comparables to decide in a particular area like anti-corruption, how are we doing against DOJ standards? How are we doing against how peers are reporting against DOJ standards? Because at the end of the day, the legal side of the brain says I've got to do what the government says shows that we have an effective compliance system. And then the other part of the brain tries to do what Tom highlighted, which is focus in on culture and ethics. And we do that through the survey that I mentioned, which is the Ethisphere Culture of Ethics Survey. What we really use that for is to design communication strategies. So what are we going to talk about with our employees annually? Are we satisfied with the way they perceive our culture? Are there areas where we think we act differently than our employees perceive? And we really now have targeted communications going out to various groups of employees where we see that disconnect. And I can tell you, it is the example, I think, of the greatest return on our investment is that those communications hitting the right employees has really opened their eyes that there is an alignment now between the company writ large and those employees on how we perceive things like senior leadership commitment to ethics or the lack of retaliation or how to respond in a pressurized business situation. So we focus in on those two areas. We have very specific times that we measure the results with internal and external benchmarks. And then the rest of the year, our tactical plans to try to change the outcome for the good for the next calendar year.
I think fantastic points, Vic, in terms of, sort of the groupings of folks, the legal side and then the ethics side, and, I know we have a few minutes remaining. And so I thought it would make sense to really focus in on that ethics side and tying that with respect to benchmarking. One of the things I find fascinating in this space is ideation as a part of the process of benchmarking. And what I mean by that is through the experience of talking to others, getting some survey information, having new ideas populate in terms of trying to integrate and make things a little bit more effective. And so, Vic, when you were mentioning the tailored communications for folks, one of the things I thought, and that popped into my mind was I had a client who did some work and realized, one of the most effective training tools was really really heavily focused on video communication. So in addition to the email communications, there were video snippets, realizing that lots of folks were retaining the information in a video more so than in an email communication. And so they decided to shift most of their communication within their front lines for certain business units to be video, knowing that they had people who were mobile on the ground and looking at their device and thought that would be more effective. I'm just curious about, and this is really to the whole group, ideas that have come through the benchmarking exercises that you've done that you've said, what, that's interesting. I like to adopt that. And so I'm gonna start with Tom, and then go to Vic, and then Reagan to close out.
Yeah, I'm going to cheat. I'm going to ask Vic a question. Do you do the culture survey every year or every other year?
We do it every year.
Every year? I think we're going to do that. We've been doing it every other year. I think we might switch to every year. Anyway, that was unfair. I shouldn't have done that.
No, it's fine. Yeah, it's fine. But part of the dialogue.
Yeah, a couple of the things that we've learned, and I mentioned this a little bit before. Very specific subject matter that that we've been recommended to do, not just by Ethisphere, but by our internal stakeholders. I always say, if you want to make a job better, get as close to the work surface as you can. Ask the person who's doing it. If you want to find out what needs to be done, get down into the workstations and ask those people. Some of the best. We're global sponsors for Special Olympics now, and it's a wonderful organization. That suggestion came from an employee in Melbourne, Australia, who said to me, "Hey, I got a kid in Special Olympics. Why aren't you doing something for that?" Got to listen to your stakeholders, and I think not just the benchmarking that you hear from professional organizations, but the benchmarking you hear from your own people.
Thank you so much, Tom. Vic?
Yeah, I talked about our communications program, so I'll just basically say, by using survey results, we went from something that was kind of an infrequent, broad messaging from the top down to something very targeted and very short. As some of you know, we call our program Take 5 Minutes to Discuss Integrity. So it's such a commitment that you only have to talk about it for 5 minutes. But by effectively using those 5 minutes on a topic that employees have told us they want to know more about is a huge return on investment. So that's an example of a benefit of an internal benchmarking effort that year-over-year comparison told us. We thought our comms were great. We lived in a bubble that said, well, boy, we really like our comms. But when we took that feedback year-over-year, we could see where we fell short. We modified our approach, and we were able to see in subsequent years a real improvement in the response rate.
That's great, Vic. I appreciate that. And then Reagan, to close it out, any parting words of wisdom and examples?
Yeah, well, I know we're almost out of time, but just really quick, 4 key points on benchmarking. Good benchmarking is ongoing. It's not just I went and saw a panel, I got to do something now. It's ongoing. It's number 2, it's tailored, so it's specific to your business. You're not just calling friends and saying, Vic, can you send me your policies so I can dust them off and change the names and the policies. It's practical and efficient. So it's where you want to be, as Vic said, depending on the company you're at, but it's practical and it's efficient given the resources you've got and that you're going to get from the board or management. And then it's risk-based. It's not focused on minutia. It's focused on the things that are in the pipeline or coming down the pipeline in terms of legal risk that you're going to have to deal with moving forward.
Reagan, I can't think of a better way to close out the conversation with respect to those 4 points. So first of all, I want to sincerely thank our panelists, Vic, Tom, Reagan. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon.